Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Happy May. I cannot believe we're already on our last session of the Feeding Capacity Building series. A gentle reminder that if you have any questions, please type into the Q&A section so we can keep track of the other questions. And please feel free to say hi to each other, to type your name and your region in the chat so we can recognize you all. Thank you so much for attending. And this series is brought to you by the Pacific Division Feeding Leadership. And I'm going to pass over to Sherry and Deborah to start us off.
Hey everybody, thank you for being here. I'm just going to quickly introduce myself and I'm going to turn the floor over to Deborah. So I am, as you see, the MassCare Regional Program Lead. I am based in San Diego, beautiful San Diego, California. Also an advanced instructor, and coincidentally, I was one of the feeding managers in Maui. So I know of which I speak, and we're looking forward to sharing a few things with you tonight. Deb?
All right, so I'm Deborah Smith. I'm going to come off my camera briefly. And fortunately, as you can see, my lighting right now is incredibly poor. So we're not going to keep it on. I'm also a little worried about my bandwidth. I'm currently deployed, so I'm coming to you from Oklahoma. If any of you manage to pick up any of the positions, we might be putting out probably more for recovery coming up, but it's potentially sheltering too, and feeding. So at this point, I'll let you know we are in hotels. So that's the good part. I am also in Blue Skies back when I'm not deployed in California Gold Country. I'm the regional MassCare lead there. I'm out here in Oklahoma now as the Assistant Director of Operations, and that's often where you'll find me. My feeding experience, however, is mostly down at the SA level, so I know what I speak from that area. However, I can tell you a bit more about headquarters, which is what I'm going to start out today talking a bit on. So to start with, we're going to talk about the feeding reporting structure. So it's a matter of where do people fit in and who kind of reports to who and how are we structured in going on. And most everything that I'm going to go over right now pretty well, you can find inside of OneSource. Underneath ConOps 5 is what you look at, Concepts of Operations version 5, where they have all of this information and a lot more that can go on as far as Red Cross, how things are set up, what levels mean, everything in that way all sits in regards to that document. So I'm going to encourage you all to go to OneSource and look for, just type in, search ConOps 5, and it'll all come up for you. So what we do, how do we present? What do you find inside there? So one thing you find are table of organizations. And our table of organizations change with whatever level is going on for that DR, that operations. So in this one, we're showing a level of table of organizations for a level 3. When you get up to something like Maui, for a level 7, which is the highest we go to in there, that you will find an incredibly larger table of organization in going through. So it grows as our levels and the size of our DRs grow. So we're looking at feeding. It's when you see this, and you will find this in your IAP, your Incident Action Plan, in there. And if you're like me, when I was sitting in not headquarters and going in there and I looked through the IAP, if I looked through the IAP, none of this made any sense to me. So I'm going to try to help make it a little bit more sense in going. So this shows out how we set up. And for feeding, we're here under MassCare in the operations section. to go through. There's also workforce, logistics, information and planning, external relations, and finance. But we live in operations, and it's the best world. So in going through, and we live down over here in mass care. So let's look at operations, mass care, and how it all goes in there. So looking at our section that we live in through, we're over here in feeding. And we see that within our mass care area with the mass care chief, and it includes the sheltering, feeding, reunification, the pet liaison, distribution of emergency supplies, and the shelter resident transition. Underneath distribution of emergency supplies also lives unsolicited donations. And under sheltering, when this came out, we had listing under there NSS, which is the National Sheltering System. That is, however, somewhat going away, and things that are related to the NSS program, the National Sheltering System, will be found in the new web EOC. So look forward to what's going on with that. So we found feeding. We're over here in mass care, and we come down and we say, what is a feeding organization? So where do we go when we're in feeding? And someone tells you, you didn't follow your chain of command, that's going to give you an idea in regards to where you go, and this is how your chain of command operates. So feeding associates report to feeding supervisors. That's the command who reports to a feeding lead who reports to the mass care chief. If something is happening that you need from one of these areas, this is the way it happens. If for some reason one of these boxes that come above are empty, then you jump to the next box when you have an issue or whoever is going to be the supervisor or program with that. So do an in-go. And then in through addition, we have the feeding table of organization, which for the field kitchen, and I know I'm not going to go over this much because I know Julia covered everything a couple of sessions ago in regards to field kitchens and through. So those are the parts that we have in that cover your reporting responsibilities, a bit in regards to how we're organized in that. But once again, I know I sound like I'm a repeating record, but to really get knowing on this charts and how this operates in the organization, go to OneSource, look up ConOps 5. The program on that, if you can too, take the course. It's ConOps 5 Intermediate, Concepts of Operations Intermediate. We're not telling everything with here. It's like a 5-hour course or something. So, do that and to move forward. I am going to ask, I do see a hand up. We're not in positions right now to be able to unmute to answer. Ewade, if we have a question or something that needs from the Q&A, I believe we're going to have a question and answer period that will go on after the link or after the presentation, and be happy at that time to move forward with it. So that is the presentation that we have in going on that. So we're going to move now to Sherry, who's going to begin on talking about tips for great supervisors. Sherry, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Deb. All right. So here we go. This is the reason you're all here, I'm quite sure. So we want to talk, a lot of these things that we'll be talking about are fairly generic for people who are supervisors within the Red Cross, but we'll talk about some things that might be specific to feeding as well. So of course, these are some of the top traits of a good supervisor. Supervisors are a critical piece of delivering the Red Cross mission. They set the tone for what happens on the disaster relief operation. So you want to show respect and recognition to your direct reports, your coworkers, and your leadership, and lead by example. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on here, but certainly leading by example, I'm sure you've all heard that term, means that you do the thing, you talk the talk, you walk the walk, right? What you say also applies to you. You want to share information clearly from your supervisor and manager meetings to everyone who reports to you, and keep your communication positive, right? Like I said, you set the tone for the operation and how your team is going to be working together and delivering services to our clients, right? So keep things positive. You are going to be the one who is adhering to our corporate policies regarding sexual harassment, discrimination, confidentiality, zero tolerance. Those are all things that you will need to be familiar with and support your workers in adhering to them. And make sure that you are taking care of yourself and all of your workers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this presentation, what that means and what some of the things are that you can do. And finally, but certainly not the least, is you will be evaluating worker performance, and you'll be doing it in a thorough and effective manner. And we're also going to be delving deeper into that a little bit later on as well. Okay. All right, so you as a supervisor are going to maintain the focus on the mission, right? We're here client-based. You know, obviously feeding, you know, sometimes you're going to be client-facing and sometimes you're not. But the ultimate goal is to be providing services to the clients, right? Whether it's getting them a good meal, getting their meals on time, you know, whether you're serving the meal or just delivering it to the shelters, it doesn't matter, right? It all applies. Pack your flexibility, right? Every mission is different, every operation is different, every day is different, every meal is different. And sometimes every minute or hour is different. And I know Deb will agree with me on that one, right?
Oh, yes.
So, yes. So very, very important, right? Demonstrate your organizational skills, but that doesn't mean that you micromanage. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit later on about delegating. If you're disorganized, your whole team is going to be disorganized, and your part of the activity on the operation is going to be disorganized, and our clients will suffer for it. Okay. You're going to be working with different people from different backgrounds and experience. We're talking about your team, right? Who works for you and with you. And we'll be talking about where these people might be coming from in a few minutes. But understand that your compassion, your flexibility, your understanding, all are going to have to come into play, right? These people are going to come also with different levels of training and experience. Okay. Calm, positive, all of these things are going to pay off for you in the long run. Okay. And understand the stress of this situation that we're all in. And I'm going to emphasize that a few more times as we go on, right? Those of you that have deployed, understand that a disaster relief operation can be quite stressful. Okay. People respond to that in different ways. So you as a supervisor, always maintaining your cool is going to go a long way towards keeping your team also keeping their cool. Okay. And obviously our clients are going to be coming from all kinds of different cultures, different backgrounds, different experiences. And we as feeding workers are going to be looking towards the needs of those people, right? They could be dietary needs. We might have language issues, communication issues, and so on that we have to address as we serve our clients. Okay, so here we go. Let's say you as a supervisor make the decision that you need staff. The first thing that you're going to want to do is work with your supervisor to determine how those people are being requested on this particular operation. Okay, it'll be different, it'll vary. Sometimes your supervisor will be the one who wants to fill out the forms. Sometimes they will give you the authority to do that. Okay, but so when you're looking for staff, you're going to want to ask yourself all of these questions and more that are on this slide. Okay, there is a form that you will have to fill out, a staff request form. For most operations now, I believe it's completed online, and there should be a link to it in the information in the, the IAP that Deb Smith mentioned earlier. Okay, the incident action plan. So these questions will need to be answered before you fill that form out or before you request staff. How many people do you need, right? What exactly is it that they're going to be doing? How many days do you need them? Is this a, full-time person that you need for 2 weeks on a deployment, or is it just a task that you need done more intermittently? Okay, where's it going to be their reporting location? When do you want them to start? Who are they going to report to? Any special skills or training, right? Do they need to know how to use Excel, for example? Okay, do they have to be able to drive one of the emergency response vehicles or an IRV? Those are sorts of things that you'll need to have very clear in your mind. Is this a job that they can do remotely? Okay, and you might think, oh gosh, feeding doesn't work remotely, but boy, there are some jobs that can be done remotely. Maybe you need an administrative person to help you do your 6409s and organize your receipts. That person could certainly work from home, right? And they don't even have to be full-time. So those are all things you want to consider. If you're looking for admin help, think about when you fill out that form, it's going to ask you what gap these people need to have in order to fill this job. If somebody is going to be doing 6409s, do they necessarily need a gap in feeding? Right? Maybe not. If they have the requisite skills to fill out 6409s and the equipment that they need to do it, they don't necessarily need a feeding gap, right? And can we utilize event-based volunteers, disaster event-based volunteers? And we're going to talk a lot more about them in just a few minutes. Okay. So let's say that you've decided who and how many you need, and all of these other questions are answered. You put in your request, and all of a sudden you've got workers, right? Where did they come from? So if you're on a disaster relief operation, your workers could come from these 4 groups that are listed here. Okay, deployed workers who have come in from outside of the local area, right? They're going to have a dedicated 2-week deployment or 3-week deployment, depending on where you are. Okay, you've got them. They're a captive audience for you. So that's good to know, right? They've come from the Red Cross. They've got a gap that you have asked for, so you have an idea of their training level, right? You'll also have local workers who may or may not have that full 2-week commitment. They might be popping in and out and just doing a shift here and there. Okay, so, but they're also trained. They're Red Cross workers, and they're going to have a gap to work for you. You're also going to have people who are affiliated with the Red Cross, but maybe don't have any training. Maybe they came from a different activity, or maybe they came from a different area of the Red Cross. Maybe they come from support to the armed forces, or maybe they come from blood services, and they may have no training whatsoever. Right, so you want to take that into consideration. And then finally, those disaster event-based volunteers that I referenced before, these are people who live in the local community, who want to make a contribution, and they will come through the Red Cross and offer to help. And Deb's gonna talk a little bit more about how those people get to us. All right, so all of those things, all of these folks are gonna come to you with different backgrounds, different motivations, different training, and different goals. Okay, so those are all things that you're gonna wanna understand about your team when they come to you. All right, so here we go. You've got your workforce. You figured out where they came from. Here's what we're going to do when they arrive, right? You're going to welcome them. You're going to thank them for giving up their time and energy, just like you did, to come serve the clients on this operation. You're going to complete job inductions. All right, I have to tell you, I went out to OneSource and tried to find the job induction checklist, and I could not find it. So that is not a good thing. But essentially, a job induction is the time that you take with one-on-one with your team to tell them what your expectations are. Right? When they come on board, are they going to be working 8 to 5? Are they going to be working 9 to 7? Are they going to be driving? Are they going to be going to different locations? Are they going to be serving food, picking up food, delivering food? Right? You want to give them all the information that they need to have to be successful in their jobs. Now, for us in feeding, it's possible that you could do a group job induction if you have more than one person who's going to be doing the same job. Okay, otherwise you're going to want to do your job inductions individually so that you can customize them for the people who are going to be working for you. Okay, set clear expectations, and as you go forward, you're going to want to coach them. Right? Make sure that they get the feedback that they need to be successful. Okay, and give them positive feedback, right? And do it publicly. Nothing puts a smile on somebody's face more than a thank you and a, hey, did everybody see what Mary just did? That was awesome. Okay, goes a long way to building your team. Okay. You may have virtual team members, like we talked about that person who might be doing your 6409s. Okay, make sure that you're staying engaged with them. Contact them by phone or whatever you guys have agreed, and do it on a regular basis so that they don't feel like they've been left out in the cold or are being taken advantage of. Okay. For feeding, you may or may not have shift briefings. If you are using people who are only going to be there for a single meal, and then you've got another team coming in for the next meal, you may need to brief the afternoon team on what happened in the morning. Okay, but since feeding isn't a 24-hour activity, those shift briefings are they could be an optional for this group. Okay. Again, make sure that your workers have everything that they need to be successful. Maybe that's a computer, maybe it's internet access, maybe it's a Red Cross vest, right? I don't know, but you know, right? Make sure that they have hair nets and gloves and serving utensils and thermometers and all of those wonderful things that make feeding run smoothly. Okay. And always thank them at the end of the day. All right, and I believe Deb's going to step back in.
Yay! Thank you, Sherry. That was great on those tips. So we're going to talk a little bit, as Sherry was talking about, working with those disaster event-based volunteers, the EVVs. And, you know, it's the sort of things where people are going on as far as our EVVs and find a large push on being able to support a disaster operation as much as possible with EBVs. And one of those reasons in doing it, when we think about it, I know you can't come off chat, but I just want to see a raise of hands. How many people started out here as a event-based volunteer? Because I know one of those hands that are going to come up in some ways is me. Okay? Because what went on as far as, of course, when I came through, we didn't have the whole process with event-based volunteers, but we, you know, today when we're doing it, we're looking at potential new Red Cross workers that may be building our region, or, you know, people that are in there. So we want to look at them. These are people we may work with again, and we want to work with them again. So we're going to do on that. And so let's remember that they bring a variety of skills, motivation, local knowledge, which is incredibly important. And these are people who came out as you did, we all know, as I did, in response to something that happened in my community, their community. This is their home. And so they have all the local knowledge. They know what the neighborhoods are. I'm going to tell you on that line, who's not getting power, who's in that. We may have the charts on it, but they've got the real actual knowledge. They know the areas, they know the lay of the lands, they know the traffic patterns. Okay, those are, sometimes that can be the most important thing of knowing, you know, it's Google tells me it's 5 minutes away, but you're going to tell me it's really 15 because every light will be red when I go through. Yeah. So that's, you know, that's the sort of thing they know and we want to use. They'll have completed an application and they'll have had a background check. That's something that our workforce people can do fairly quickly nowadays. And so there really opens up what they're able to do through. May come to us once, may work, you know, every other day, may work and stay, you know, all for 14 days, the same way as you worked out and finish out an operation, and sometimes longer, because it's their home, and if that's what they're able to give. But a lot of them can't. They're still working in unable to do a whole lot of other things. That's okay. You know, I'm really happy to have the extra work hands that are around that are brought by a disaster event-based volunteer. Probably going to work shorter shifts. That can often be an issue if you're looking at getting an event-based volunteer to handle and fill in for a lot of things that are going on. You're going to have to remember event-based volunteers are not going to be working your 12 to 12, doing a feeding operation that goes on, you know, for hours at a time. They are, however, really, you know, as far as in building up and knowing as a supervisor or in working with that, we do a lot of things in feeding that really truly are 4-hour shifts. We may do them 3 or 4 times in regards to, yes, we may drive out to do several or 1 or 2 fixed sites. We may be working and just delivering lunch and dinner. We may adding that breakfast. Each one of those could be a shift that included a disaster event-based volunteer. And as a supervisor, or especially if you're someone working in headquarters, that has to stay on your mind at all times. Can I use an event-based volunteer to go through? Can I help build our workforce by using somebody who might build into a Red Cross worker in that? And remember, because their background checked. They have completed an application. When they go through Workforce, they get access to a lot of the things, and they set up an account. So they can have access to some of our technology, our team sites, if needed. If you're using someone who's doing the 6409s, they may need that access. SharePoint, Skya, Shelter Client Information Gap. They will have and be given a login through Volunteer Connection to be able to use that app. So there are a lot of things that they can do. And don't look at in regards to, well, I can't put them in that position because they don't have that access. It may be very easy to get them that access if that's what you need them to do. And remember that they can do it in through. And so when you're working through also with them, you want to be sure that you follow whatever policy that goes on in regards to signing in, making sure that it's returned to whoever is doing on the volunteer side. Workforce's HDR has a little different process as to exactly what they want you to do paperwork-wise and sign-in-wise with your event-based volunteers or disaster event-based volunteers. So when you're on a DR, always check in and see what the individual desires are of that DR that goes on through, because we're going to look and make sure that we have completed everything from our side that Workforce is going to need to continue to give and get us event-based volunteers. So might want to ask on this question in our plan for it as far as event-based volunteers. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of event-based volunteers. How do you get them? Because a lot of that has been covered already when Sherry talked about earlier getting staff. So you're going to work with Workforce when you come in and go up that chain of command to the person who's over in headquarters to be able to get to you from Workforce, what the procedure is that that particular disaster operation wants to use in order to request that staff. So that's one to check in on that one. So we're going to look at our plan for disaster event-based volunteers. And when we're looking, we're going to look to prepare a list of tasks that would be a good fit for them. And we'll look at what those good fits are in through this. We want them to be a meaningful job. You know, I'm going to put this, but they are not the bottom line. Let's give them the job nobody else ever wants to do. That's not EBVs. We're at this point in time, you'll hear it over and over, a good experience, which is something we want for all of our workers. But for our EBVs that are coming in for 4 hours to work out, they're looking at having something in that way, hopefully, that's going to give them potentially a mission moment, that period where they feel really helpful, that something they have done has made a difference to someone else. Something that, you know, we all somehow find in working in operation. To have that same moment for our DEBVs is really what turns people. When I had that moment, it's like, that's why I've been here for 10 years. That's why I continue up. So we want to provide that for people. So we choose the tasks that not only can be completed within 4 to 6 hours. Not going to use a whole lot of technology access. There are the jobs and accesses that we talked about on that one, but you know, at this point, we don't use in feeding, but you might find information and planning may not put in people who have to build maps and GIS, but nothing that, you know, is dealing with an incredible amount of technology need on that. Integrate into the team. Once again, that's part of that good experience. Don't take please working with an EBV put them off by themselves necessarily without maintaining interaction with your team. It's important to have that. It's important for all of us, and we want to be able to go on. Recognize their contributions. Once again, as Sherry said, their staff in that one. People like to be recognized, thanked for what they do. I like it. I know it's like that on people. So make sure that we do that and invite them back. Please come back. Come back on this operation is that. Come back to Red Cross and join us, and you can do this again or even do it elsewhere in through. So what are some of the things they can do? Easily be a feed worker. In feeding, we use a lot of disaster event-based volunteers in going on. Here in Oklahoma, we have been grateful on this disaster operation that we have received a lot of people who have come in as wanting to work as disaster event-based volunteers. And we have use on that, and they are definitely a good use in supplementing our staff. I'm incredibly grateful we have them that are going on. So definitely in feeding to look at, as Jerry mentioned, an admin worker. We might be in some ways, we think as far as remotely, but maybe you just need someone to come in 3 or 4 days and or 3 or 4 times a day or 3 or 4 hours a day. I know I can talk, guys, I'm deployed and it's 8 o'clock back here. But it's something, if you just need a short task out of there, you can ask for somebody with Excel skills in going on. So that's a possibility. Translators, a local translator and an EBV to come in and use excellent and it happen. Canteening, wonderful on that line. They talk about, canteening or feeding in a nerve. We often have problems getting enough to have 2. We know we can put 3 people in a nerve. So we're on that line, and it's always helpful if you can. That third person can be that EBVs that are in through. Working DES are working with us, assembling food kits and food packs. They can be a driver. They can be the second person in the car. They can unload. They can load. They can pick up and delivery. They can do site session cleanup. There are a lot of ways that we in feeding use and can use a disaster evasive volunteer in through. So going on.
Deborah, I'd like to remind you that we have a few minutes left before we go to questions.
Okay, so just on that one, just some quick communication tips in through. Let's make sure we inform workers of how they can keep up to date. That's letting people know the statements as far as we're training and things in that line. We want to make sure that people, information flows up as well as down. That's enabling for us to be able to know that I tell my supervisor and my supervisor tells me that all stuff goes up and down. As a supervisor, I want to be able to say, I have an open door. You can come and tell me your problems. You can come and tell me, do not be afraid on that. Anytime on that, let me know. Tell people why you're doing things. Jerry mentioned lead by example. Encourage them to ask questions. If you don't know something, please ask me. There's no dumb questions. Anything in that for go. So doing that one, and then think carefully about what you choose not to share, because a lot of things, information you may think somebody doesn't need to know, they do need to know. So really think, am I withholding information because it needs to be withheld? Or am I just withholding information because I don't feel like talking to people and I don't think you need to know it when it's something that could be told? So that's just some basic communication tips in through. And we're going to pass it back over to Sherry.
Thanks, Deb. Really interesting. So I mentioned earlier about delegating work and not micromanaging. Okay, so just be aware that you as a supervisor, you can't be everywhere every minute, right? It's easy to get yourself mired down in the technical day-to-day work and forget that you're a supervisor. But your job is really to manage and orchestrate the work getting done. Okay, give your folks some ability to develop their own skills, right? So by delegating work, here are some of the benefits, right? That I'll let you guys read those because certainly you don't need me to, right? But it empowers your team and helps them build skills, and hopefully you're able to develop some more people who then get supervisory skills and promote, right? Because we certainly can use more supervisors in every activity in the Red Cross, right? It distributes the workload so you're not making yourself insane, right? You're not running around with your hair on fire, as Jane Scanlon would say. And it allows you to focus on your own priorities as a supervisor and do some strategic thinking. Okay, so I encourage you to think about things that you can ask other people to do. Okay. All right, my very favorite topic. I could spend hours and hours on this. Please take classes, talk to your workforce engagement folks for tips and tricks. You as a supervisor are going to have to do performance evaluations. And it breaks my heart when somebody comes back from a deployment and says, oh, I never got an eval, even though I was there for 2 weeks. That should never happen. I just want to say that again. That should never happen. And you as a supervisor are responsible for doing the evaluations for your team. Okay, I've got the rules of thumb over there on the left-hand side about when you have to do evals and when you should do evals and when you don't have to do evals. Okay, so that's important for you to know. Okay, you'll have on when you deploy, you'll get your team roster so you know who is assigned to you and who needs to get an evaluation. Okay, these are so vitally important, and I'm sure that you as Red Cross volunteers know how important they are to you. It gives, not only does it give feedback to them, but it gives them an opportunity to sort of shine, right? To really bring out and clarify for them what they've accomplished. And it tells their region when they go back home what it was that they accomplished. It gives you a chance to understand what their goals are and to encourage them to move on forward with their Red Cross career. Please, performance evaluations should never be a surprise. Okay, there should be nothing on that performance evaluation that they don't already know about. Okay, try to get them done before the worker leaves the job. Try to get them done before you leave the job. However, once you have checked off of a disaster relief operation, you will still have access to those evaluations for 7 days. They'll still be in your queue, and you really, please, please, please get them done. Okay. There are all kinds of people who can help you with ideas about how to fill them out, so take advantage. All right, and finally, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I want to circle back, right? Remember that being on a disaster relief operation can be very emotionally charged, right? It's going to impact you. It's going to impact your team members. You're tired, right? Stressed. Tempers can flare. Here are some really great tricks for you to use for yourself and to use for your team members, right? Maintain a healthy routine. Don't eat all of the crap that is around on a disaster relief operation. You know what I'm talking about. You go to headquarters, there are, Oreos and, sugary snacks all over the place. Be careful about what you're eating, right? Try to go for a walk if you can every day, right? Just, get the juices flowing, right? Try to get lots of sleep. Okay, stay connected to your family and your friends, right? They're going to be your lifeline. Talk to people on the job. If you feel stressed and you want to have a chat with one of the disaster mental health workers or disaster spiritual care, please do that and monitor these things for your team. Okay, have an eye on how everybody is doing. Do you need to pull somebody aside and have a chat with them, make sure that they're doing okay, or refer them to speak with mental health or spiritual care? Right? You are responsible for these folks. All right. Make some time for fun, right? Don't be afraid to be silly with your team, right? Do silly stuff. Set aside some time for a card game or, watch a movie or whatever it is. All right. And understand your limits. Okay. Where do you need to draw the line? Do you need to just get up and take a walk around the parking lot for a minute before you explode, right? Okay. So take care of yourself, take care of your team, and I believe we're ready to now step into, there's some resources for you. I'm sure you'll get the slide deck. There are all kinds of classes, not only on Edge, but also in Percipio. Okay, so take advantage of those. And here we are.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Thank you so much, Deborah, for taking your time to present for us, and especially Deborah for for being the tornado operation and still coming here to support us. Before we go to the questions, Mary, would you like to say a few words?
I would. Thank you very much. And as your Pacific Division feeding lead, I want to take this opportunity to quickly thank everyone who has joined us over the last 9 Wednesdays. We truly appreciate it. We have people from Guam, and I know it's like 11:30 in the morning there, and people from New York, whom that's 9:30 at night. So I do appreciate it. I know a lot of you had to jump off to attend other meetings. I do want to say 4 quick things. First of all, we work closely with sheltering, so I'm going to encourage you all to continue your Wednesday night series when the sheltering series begins next week. I strongly would recommend that you attend there because we work so closely with them. Next, if you need help in deploying, you have my phone number, you have my email. I've put it in the chat several times. If you want to deploy and you're having difficulty deploying in feeding, let me know. And lastly, if you're interested in moving up to a supervisor and you're having difficulty with that within your region or someplace, call me, email, text me. I'm happy to help you with that. So again, I'm going to pass it back to Iwe to get a few questions for our 2 panel members.
Thank you so much, Mary. Okay. Now, Deborah and Deborah, may I, since we don't have too much questions and we have probably 10 more minutes, may I put you on the spot that you're currently deployed as Assistant Director of Operations? Would you mind to share with us the types of feeding that you're doing on your current operation so our workforce can get a better understanding of the real life situation that we presented so far?
Oh, so right now we have 3 shelters open, but one probably may not stay. It's down to 1 client, and our other 2 shelters are getting down low. So we are at that point. But what we have been doing in that is we've worked with partners. We've had very good luck with that, to working in partners in being able to use for feeding. But what we are doing is we are also doing mobile routes. We have a lot of goes where we're taking out IRFs. We have 4 IRFs on this operation that we're sending out to various communities that are not able to head in. So we have that. We also have some IRFs that are IRFs between going mobile, but we have areas where we're doing partial fixed feeding. Where we have come out to an area and brought food, and people are coming to us, but it's not our shelter, or in that situation, it's almost a pod. We have gone over at one point to do feeding at an area which is not really a resource, but I call them a community distribution, sort of resource center, in that they're calling it the expo, but that's, in through. So we have a lot of different feeding that we're doing on this operation. We're putting out, last night, tomorrow, we're due to put out about 1,100 meals. We've been moving that forward. So it's not an incredibly large operation. It's not what you had in Guam anyway. But definitely, we've used everything that you've talked about in this series.
Great. Thank you. And question for the panel. Do event-based volunteers get mission cards?
No, they do not. They're not going, they do not get a mission card. They are local. They live, definitely there's no travel. They often are short term on it. But one of the reasons that I'm glad you brought that up, they don't get mission cards. But if you have a shot at it, you are allowed to use your mission card to buy them lunch. So if you are taking an EBV out to lunch, you can be the one actually treating and use your mission card to do it, to go forward. And then just know, as far as who it is, we record out that you had another meal with someone. Right?
Thank you so much. And I think people wants to see the resources slide again. On your own presentation on your computer on Teams, since this is a live presentation, you're able to go back to the slides that you want to see. And also on the link that I sent out this afternoon, the slides link, they're already live on there that you can go and see. I do not see any other questions in the Q&A section. Does anyone wants to come off mute or have a question or want to raise your hand that I can unmute you?
Somebody had their hand raised earlier when we were going through the tables of organization.
Right. Charlotte Anderson, would you like to come off mute? Did you have a question that time?
It is. If I raised my hand, it was an accident. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
No problem on that.
Just thought to check. And I wanted to double check. Alan from the sheltering group, do we start next week or do we start the following week for the sheltering series? Sorry, Mary, you go ahead. You go ahead first.
Oh, I was just going to ask a question of either Deb or Sherry. So is it feasible when you bring on EBVs for the day for a 4-hour shift to do a group induction or group orientation rather than individual?
Yes,
Yes,
if they're all
absolutely.
coming in at the same job, it's the same thing. An EBV, as far as your supervisors and job induction and that, pretty well the same as if you were getting a regular, gapped worker. So that should be about the same in through.
Yeah, so Mary, I think I mentioned when I was talking about job inductions, if you have people who are going to be doing exactly the same job, you can do a job induction for a group. But if they're doing different jobs, then of course you're going to be wanting to do them one-on-one.
Thank you. So the shelter series is May 15th. You will receive a Teams invite from me shortly this week. And I know the original link that we had has one additional session on it. I'll be canceling that session on the email. So you might get multiple emails. So don't get confused when you see all those multiple links on there. Anyone else from the panel that wants to say anything? Kay, do you want to say anything before we end?
No, I just appreciate Mary's work on this and putting it together. And Iwe, your efforts have been great in coordinating all of this, and everybody who attended. Thank you so much. And let's just continue it on into sheltering.
Thank you so much, all. If we don't have any questions, we'd like to conclude this session early. This is the very last session. Thank you so much, all, for attending. I am hoping that you learned a lot from this series, whether to watch the live session or watch the YouTube. I do hope that you made some friends, you learned some tips, and we'll see you on the next disaster.
Anyway, we have
Scott-
a hand up.
Yes, I see that. Scott, would you like to?
Scott,
You know what? Let me go ahead and unmute you first before you come off mute. Let me go ahead and mute. Just 1 second. Okay, Scott, you can come off mute.
Never mind. I don't know how I hit the raise hand.
No worries.
You're probably just very excited that you're finally able to join us live this time instead of listening to recordings.
Yes, I was.
If
Well,
you're
I'm
like
sorry
me,
it's
Scott, you
ended.
went to hit react and you hit raise hand instead. But I do it all the time.
I'm raising my hand this time. I'm kind of sorry it's ending, so I'm ready for the next series.
Glad to hear that.
Perfect. And Hillary put in the comment that we've done 2 shelter series in the past for 2 consecutive years. This time is brand new. So this shelter series is not a repeat. So we highly encourage you to attend on May the 15th. Thank you all. I will see you next time.
Sherry and Deb, Eway's going to call us back and we'll do a quick debrief if